You had always been the silent storm of the office, diligent, quiet, and invisible in the best way. You weren't loud or flashy. You didn't charm clients with clever banter or steal the room with confidence, but your work impeccable, organized. And for the longest time, that was enough, especially because your cold, intimidating CEO John Jungkook seemed to respect that silence. He never said much, but he watched. You could feel it, the way his eyes would linger on your reports longer than others, the way he would nod slightly when you walked in on time. It wasn't affection, not warmth, but it was something. Until this morning, you had barely taken a sip of your lukewarm coffee when your name echoed through the office. Kang Wyan, can I speak with you? Jungkook's voice was sharp, no emotion in his tone. Now, heads turned, you swallowed the rising panic in your throat and stood, notebook in hand, legs slightly trembling. You stepped into his office, and the moment the door clicked shut, the air changed. His secretary was already there, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with something smug. You avoided looking at him. Jungkook didn't waste time. Do you even read what you sent before forwarding it to the board? He asked, lifting a printout of the weekly client strategy memo. You froze. That file, you remembered it. You sent it out late last night, exhausted, breathless from your hospital visit the evening before. There were budget errors, misplaced data points. You marked an ongoing deal as finalized. His tone was razor sharp. If Kim and Han had noticed this before I did, we would have lost them. You opened your mouth but no words came out. What could you even say? His eyes darkened. This isn't the first time either. You blinked. His secretary stepped forward. I told you, sir, she has been distracted lately. Missed a few smaller things too. I have had to double check her submissions. That wasn't completely true. You had made mistakes, small ones, but you had always corrected them, and you had a reason, but you couldn't tell them that. Not now, not when your head was spinning, not when you could feel your heartbeat thudding wrong again. I'm sorry, you whispered, voice barely audible. Jungkook narrowed his eyes. Sorry doesn't fix it. If something is going on, you need to communicate. I can't keep getting blindsided. I'll do better, you said, bowing slightly. There was a few seconds of silence before he spoke again. This time his voice was softer than before. You are capable, that's why I'm disappointed. I understand. You didn't look up, you couldn't. Your vision was already a little blurry. You turned, ignoring the triumphant smirk on the secretary's face, and walked out. By the time you reached your desk, your hands were trembling, not from fear but because you knew something was wrong. You had been ignoring it for weeks, the racing heart, the chest pressure, the lightheadedness. You kept telling yourself you would get it checked after this report, after this deadline, after this project, but your body had other plans. You didn't come to work the next day or the one after that. No call, no leave application, no reply to emails, because that night you had collapsed in the hallway of your apartment. Your younger brother found you, barely breathing. The ambulance came in time, but only just. The hospital lights were blinding when you opened your eyes. You didn't even get a chance to ask what happened before your mother was crying beside you and the doctor was explaining you needed emergency heart surgery. Your condition, one you had kept hidden from almost everyone, had worsened and it couldn't wait any longer. Jungkook sat behind his sleek black desk, scrolling through the early morning reports when he noticed the silence. Your desk, the one always lit first thing in the morning, with your neatly arranged files and color-coded notes. He checked the time, 9:03 a.m. You were never late. His eyes flicked to the hallway outside his glass office. Secretary Ji-hoon was walking by with two coffees in hand. Where is she? Jungkook asked, not bothering to look up from his screen. Ji-hoon paused mid-step. Who? He did look up this time, eyes sharp. You know who. Jihoon hesitated, then shifted both cups to one hand and pulled out his phone. Oh, Wayne, let me check the attendance log. A few seconds passed. No leave request, no email, nothing. He gave a small shrug. Maybe she's embarrassed about yesterday. Jungkook's expression didn't change. That doesn't explain the silence. Maybe she's avoiding confrontation. He did sort of. Jihoon trailed off, then added with a smirk, roast her in front of me. Jungkook's jaw flexed. He glared at him. Watch your mouth. Jihoon gulped. Should I call her? He nodded. Jihoon quickly stepped out and returned a few minutes later. No answer. Straight to voicemail. Jungkook's gaze shifted toward your desk again. He didn't say anything. Did she quit? No. You weren't the kind to walk away without a word. You didn't have it in you to leave things unfinished. Not you. He opened his inbox and clicked on your last email. Timestamp 11:48 p.m. You had sent it right before midnight. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then stilled. He closed the email and leaned back in his chair. Something felt wrong. Not just the mistake in the file, not the silence. You. He had noticed it. The slight tremble in your hands yesterday. The way your complexion had looked pale, almost ghostly. The way your voice had sounded weaker than usual when you whispered, I'll do better. He hated that sentence. He hadn't asked for better, he had asked for the truth. But you never gave it, and now you were just gone. The next day your desk was still empty, and the one after that. By the fourth morning, something had shifted in Jungkook. He wasn't someone who dwelled on absent employees. He didn't chase people who walked away. If someone didn't show up, he moved on, replaced them, filled the gap. But this felt different. He stared at your chair again, the untouched pen beside your monitor, your mug still resting on a coaster that said, breathe, you are doing fine. He coughed under his breath. No, you weren't, and he hadn't even noticed. Any word? He asked Jihoon again. The secretary shook his head, frowning this time. Still nothing. I tried calling yesterday, again this morning, even emailed. Try now. Jihoon did, on speaker. The same hollow beep voicemail. Jungkook leaned forward, fingers clasping together under his chin. She wouldn't just disappear. Jihoon hesitated. Should I look into her emergency contact information? No, Jungkook said quietly, but the muscles in his jaw were tight. She'll reach out. But hours passed, still nothing. That night, as the office emptied out and Jungkook stared at the city lights from the top floor, his phone buzzed. One message from your number. He sat up straighter instantly, unlocking it without a second thought, but it wasn't you. Hello, this is Kang Waiyan's younger brother. I'm sorry to text like this, but I thought someone from her office should know. His eyes froze on the next line. My sister collapsed 2 nights ago. She was admitted to the hospital. The doctors said her heart condition worsened. They had to perform emergency surgery. The phone almost slipped from his hands. She is stable now, but unconscious. She hadn't told anyone, not even us. She just kept saying she had work to finish, that she didn't want to lose her job. Jungkook didn't read the rest. He stood up so fast his chair slammed backward against the glass wall. Jihoon, he barked. The secretary rushed in, startled. What? Cancel everything. Tomorrow's meeting, the Tokyo call, postpone the investor brief. Jihoon blinked confused. Sir, the board, I said cancel everything. Jihoon had never seen Jungkook like this. What happened? He asked cautiously. Jungkook's fingers tightened around the phone. Wayne is in the hospital. The city blurred past the car windows as Jungkook drove himself. No driver, no assistant, just him. And the echo of your silence and his voice, sharp and cold in your last conversation, haunting him now like a ghost. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights flickered above as Jungkook stepped into the quiet corridor. Your brother was sitting on a plastic bench outside the ICU. He stood up the moment he recognized him. You are her boss? Jungkook nodded. Where is she? The boy motioned to the door behind him. Still unconscious. The surgery went okay. They said she'll wake up soon. How long had she been sick? The boy's expression faltered a while. She was on medication, but it wasn't working anymore. The doctors warned her, told her she needed the surgery within a few months. Why didn't she take time off? She didn't want to be a burden to anyone. She was scared he would fire her. Jungkook's chest tightened painfully. I was strict, but I never. Nuna looked up to you. She never said it, but she always wanted to be seen. Not praised, just noticed. Jungkook looked through the small glass window into your room. You were lying still, pale against the sterile sheets. Machines blinked softly around you, tracking every breath, every heartbeat, and it hit him all at once. The reason for the mistakes, the late emails, the trembling hands, the quiet apologies. You weren't careless, you were breaking, and he never saw it. The hospital felt colder at night. Maybe it was the sterile walls, maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was guilt. Jungkook sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair outside your ICU room, fingers steepled beneath his chin, staring at the soft glow of the monitor tracking your heartbeat. He hadn't moved in hours, no laptop, no phone calls, no assistant hovering behind him, just him and you, lying unconscious, fragile in a way he couldn't stand seeing. Your younger brother had long since fallen asleep on the next bench, curled up in a hoodie too big for him. Jungkook had given him his coat earlier when he saw the boy shiver. The doctor's words still echoed in his mind. She pushed it too long. The damage could have been worse. Honestly, she's lucky she made it in time. But luck had nothing to do with it. You didn't make it in time. You made it just barely. And he had been shouting at you about a file while your heart was literally failing. Jungkook leaned forward, pressing his fingers to his forehead, his thoughts spiraling. Why didn't you tell him? Why didn't he ask? Why did he only see your mistakes and not the fear in your eyes, or the way your shoulders trembled when you bowed and walked out? Maybe because he never allowed himself to get close. Cold, calculated, efficient. That's the man he was known to be. That's the man you worked for, and now that man sat outside your hospital room, heart heavier than it had ever been. The nurse walked by around dawn, quietly checking on your IV. Sir, she whispered, seeing him still awake. He looked up. You can go home. She'll be asleep for a while. I'll call if anything changes. Jungkook shook his head. I'm staying. The nurse hesitated. You, her boyfriend? He didn't answer at first, then quietly said no. She nodded and left. But his heart whispered something else. Not yet. Around 6 a.m., the doctor finally came by again, clipboard in hand. She's doing well. We expect her to regain consciousness later today. She'll be weak, but it's a good sign. She fought through the hardest part. Jungkook let out a breath he hadn't even realized he had been holding since the message came in. Thank you, he said, standing. The doctor paused. You are the one who kept calling the hospital all night, right? Asking about updates. Jungkook gave a small nod. She's lucky, the doctor said with a small smile. She has people who care. Jungkook said nothing, but as he looked through the window again, his eyes softened, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO. He just felt like a man sitting outside a hospital room, praying for someone who didn't even know he was there. 3 months, 90 days, that's how long it had been since you walked out of John Jungkook's office, heart pounding, breath shallow, bones aching, and collapsed just hours later in your apartment hallway. The surgery left a long scar and a deeper silence inside you. Recovery wasn't just about your heart, it was about the memories, the ones that replayed in your mind at night. His voice, cold and distant, your own voice, small and apologetic, and the quiet weight. But you were stronger now, maybe still healing, but breathing on your own, walking without fear. So when you stepped into the office building again, the familiar scent of printer ink and roasted coffee hit you all at once. A soft ache bloomed in your chest. Everything looked the same, but you didn't feel the same. Your heels clicked softly against the marble tiles as you walked toward the elevator. The receptionist blinked at you, eyes wide. "You are back," she whispered. "Oh my god, you look. Are you okay now?" You gave a small nod, your voice soft. "I'm okay." She smiled and her hand briefly touched yours. "We missed you. He didn't replace you, you know." You paused. "What?" She leaned in. "Your desk, it stayed untouched. Even the CEO told Jihoon not to assign anyone else." You didn't know what to say, you just nodded and stepped into the elevator. The doors opened on the top floor with a soft chime, and there he was, Jungkook, standing in front of his office like he had been waiting there all morning. Your heart skipped, not from fear this time, but something else. He was dressed in his usual black suit, sleeves rolled neatly, but his expression was not the same man who scolded you that morning. His gaze locked on you instantly. You stopped walking, he didn't move. For a long moment, neither of you said a word, then he stepped forward. "Good to see you back." You nodded slowly. "I wanted to come back." He glanced at the file you were holding, your updated medical documents neatly arranged as always. "You don't have to explain," he said quietly, voice lower than you remembered. "Just, I'm glad you are back." You didn't know what to say to that, so you said the only thing you had wanted to say before everything fell apart. "I'm sorry." Jungkook's eyes narrowed and he shook his head. "Don't." "But you don't owe me anything," he interrupted softly. "You were carrying something alone and I never asked why. I just assumed. I treated you like a mistake, not a person." The hallway was too quiet, you could hear your own breathing. You swallowed. "You weren't wrong to be angry. I did mess up. That doesn't mean I had the right to make you feel like you didn't matter." You looked down, your fingers tightening slightly around the file. "Thank you for coming to the hospital." He looked at you for a long time before saying, "I wasn't sure if I had the right." "You did." You whispered. A long silence followed, then he said something that hit deeper than anything else. "You didn't have to come back to work." "I wanted to." "Why?" Your eyes lifted to meet his. "Because this was the one thing I didn't want to lose." His throat bobbed and he nodded once slowly. "I kept your desk the same. Everyone else wanted to replace you. But you didn't." He stepped aside, holding his hand out toward your space like a silent offering. "Welcome back." It had been 2 weeks since your return. The first few days felt like walking on thin glass, people watching you with kind eyes, but curious ones too. No one asked where you had been. Maybe they knew, maybe they heard, or maybe they just saw the changes in your eyes and understood something had happened. But one person never asked, Jungkook. He never cornered you with questions or tried to force a conversation. Instead, he watched from afar, like always. Except this time it wasn't with cold distance, it was quieter now, the way he noticed you. When you coughed once in the meeting room, a bottle of warm water appeared near your desk within 10 minutes. When you returned from your lunch break looking pale, Jihoon told you the CEO had rescheduled your last 2 tasks of the day. He never said it aloud, but his actions painted a story you could finally start to read. And yet nothing was spoken, not until that evening. It was just past 7 p.m. when the office lights began dimming one by one. You were still at your desk finishing a last report when his voice came from behind. Got a minute? You turned slowly. Jungkook stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a coffee mug. Not his usual black one. This one was navy, chipped slightly on the edge. Sure, you said, blinking up at him. He gave a small nod and disappeared into his office. You hesitated, then followed. His office looked the same, cold lines, dark marble, spotless, but the windows were open this time, and the night breeze was gently rustling through the sheer curtains. He stood by the door until he motioned toward the small sofa near the window, not across the desk, not like a boss. You sat, he placed the mug in front of you, chamomile tea, the kind you always drank before surgery. You stared at it, throat tight. How have you been, really? He asked softly. You looked up. I'm okay now. He nodded once, and before, back then, you hesitated. I was scared, mostly of losing things, my job, my health, myself. He said nothing for a moment. Why didn't you tell me? You blinked, because I thought I wasn't allowed to be personal around you. His breath caught. I made you feel like that. You smiled sadly, not directly, but I was already feeling small. I didn't think anyone would care. I cared. He said, the words escaping before he could stop them. You looked at him. He wasn't hiding now, not behind sarcasm, not behind work, just him, raw and real. I cared when you were late, when you stopped laughing at the receptionist's jokes, when you looked tired all the time. And then, that morning I snapped. I was frustrated, not just because of the file, but because I knew something was wrong and you wouldn't tell me. Your lips parted slightly. I wasn't used to anyone caring. I wasn't used to caring. He admitted quietly. Silence fell again, but it wasn't awkward. It was warm, like two storms finally settling. I never told you this, but you were the first employee I ever noticed. Not for efficiency, but for your stillness. My stillness? You always looked like you were trying to disappear, and yet you were the one I noticed the most. Your chest ached, not from illness, from emotion. I thought you hated me. He chuckled, shaking his head. No, I hated that I couldn't stop watching you. I hated that when you weren't here, nothing felt right. Your eyes stung. Jungkook. I was scared too, but not of losing a deal or a client. I was scared I had lost you. His hand brushed the edge of your fingers on the sofa. You didn't pull away. You once asked me in an email if I had any feedback for your performance. I never replied. You smiled faintly, I remember. I didn't reply because what I wanted to say wasn't professional. You tilted your head. What did you want to say? He turned toward you fully, his eyes softer than you had ever seen them. I think you are the strongest person I've ever met and the quietest fighter, and I wish I had seen you sooner, really seen you, before it was almost too late. Your heart thudded. I see you now and I don't want to look away again. You felt the tears gathered at the corner of your eyes, but you blinked them away. Then after a pause you said, I used to think love looked like grand gestures, fireworks, red roses, but now I think it looks like this. Like what? He whispered. Like chamomile tea and showing up at hospitals? Like not replacing someone's chair even when they are gone? Like asking, how have you been, and meaning it? He looked like he might break at your words. Then slowly he reached up and tugged a strand of hair behind your ear. His palm rested briefly against your cheek and then he leaned in. Not hurried, not desperate, just sure. When his lips met yours, it wasn't the fireworks you once dreamed of. It was better. It was quiet, safe, warm and real.